And then I have the pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Alfonsine Williams from Nearshore Friends. Nearshore Friends is actually the company of Andreas, who is also here today. I've known Andreas for a long time. So it's my personal pleasure to welcome you guys today. And Alfonsine will tell us about remote hiring people from Ukraine, because Nearshore Friends, they actually have a lot of experience in doing that for years. So I'm very curious to hear about this. So Alfie, the stage is all yours.
All right, so thanks a lot for having me. I mean, Andreas here as well. Okay, so just to give you a bit of background, so Nearshore Friends, for well over a decade now, we've been operating and have a lot of roots in Ukraine. We do primarily specialize in hiring remote engineers. So, well, as the name would imply, nearshore development, connecting, in particular, Ukrainian engineers to different companies from around the globe. I myself am American. Obviously, we're a German company as well, and we see ourselves as an international piece and really just connecting people and talented engineers to the right projects. I myself and Andreas, we lived in Kiev for nearly a decade. I came here to Berlin, where I'm based now, once the war actually started. So what we're going to go over are just some of the basics, right? Like why, just to give a bit more information on why Ukraine has been such a popular destination over the years, especially before the war. The current situation now, when it comes to hiring, when it comes to working, you'll hear some of the things that many of our speakers have already kind of touched on in certain manner of speech. And of course, what it may look like moving forward based on what we've seen right in the market, based on our experience. And of course, a few things that should someone be looking to work with and hire someone in Ukraine, whether from Ukraine or in Ukraine, important questions that now have to be asked, just because, as you're all aware, the situation has changed, and we want to support Ukraine in any way possible. But we also understand, when people have certain fears that they want to address and things that may be uncomfortable to speak about, but still we see it as an opportunity to learn and grow and share more information about, the place we all love, being Ukraine. Okay, so I will go to the next slide. Now, before the war, now it's estimated that there were at least more than 200,000, technology specialists. And one of the reasons why Ukraine is unique is not just the massive size of the country that a lot more people are familiar with now, right? It's also the amount of engineers. There's a deep history of having great engineering talent in Ukraine. Now, it's estimated that maybe about 40% of that talent alone was in Kiev, but you still have and had many IT hubs throughout all of Ukraine, whether it be Lviv, Odessa, Kharkiv, so north, south, east, west, all covered throughout Ukraine, which is one of the reasons why Ukraine has always been a popular destination for many companies who were looking to, of course, not only have really great tech talent, but also there are benefits in terms of cost, in terms of ease of working with engineers, ease of doing business. There has been a lot of investment, I would say, in the IT sector within Ukraine, where maybe there were other things that lagged behind, as mentioned previously, in terms of development. It's clear to everyone, I believe, that the IT sphere was one that was very progressive, that still is very progressive. And you had a lot of companies investing in talent. You had a lot of universities who were basically really pushing out a lot of great IT specialists, right? There are cultural aspects of it. A junior engineer in Ukraine starts working probably before many other junior level engineers start working in other countries. So there was this great climate of progress when it comes to IT development. A lot of support, I believe, internally. You know, any of the issues or the concerns that people had with other things within Ukraine that tended to really not affect the IT sphere, right? So that is something that is to really be applauded. And I think a lot of people know about Ukraine or Ukrainians purely from an IT and academic point of view, which I think says a lot about the level of talent that has come from Ukraine and that's still there in Ukraine to this day. Now, as I mentioned, there are statistics here we can look at when we understand that the reason why so many companies really want to work with Ukrainians is where you have the academic aspect of things. So this is a highly educated workforce, right? Where everyone, as you can see, many of those in IT have academic degrees in IT, and almost half have bachelor degrees, 36%, maybe even more at this point, master's degrees. So education in IT is something that is taken very seriously in Ukraine. You can also see, as we mentioned here, that there are plenty of Fortune 500 companies with development centers in Kiev in particular, but especially throughout Ukraine. Many may not advertise it or did not advertise it. However, if you are aware of the market, you would see that there are plenty of connections to very large, primarily Western-based establishments because of the fact that you know that if you're going into Ukraine and you want to hire engineers, that not only are you going to get high-level, high-skilled engineers, well, you're also going to get engineers that are diverse, engineers that can rival basically any other country on the planet in terms of their efficiency and their ability to create. And as you'll see, there's also another aspect of this, as I mentioned previously, the amount of students, right, that continuously come out. So there's not much of an issue when it comes to enrollment or engineers being a scarcity in Ukraine. Sometimes it's also a numbers game, right? Being able to have a lot of engineers available in a market that supports them, in a market that for many Western or Western European companies is very attractive from a financial point of view. And this is something that Nearshore Friends have been doing for a while, really bridging the gap as many companies do, and really seeing a lot of growth opportunities and expansion opportunities by actually working with the Ukrainian engineers, whether they be in Ukraine or outside of Ukraine. And one last thing before I move to the next slide, it is also about location, right? Location is very important. That's another reason why many companies were drawn and have been drawn to Ukraine, because Ukraine really is, although now the middle of everything in a geopolitical sense, but definitely from a geographical sense, quite literally in the middle of everything, right? There's a lot of overlap in terms of time zones. It's very easy to connect when it comes to east coast of the US and then further east into Asia, and of course, very close to every single other EU Western European country when it comes to being able to communicate in time zones. Now, since the war has started, the reason why I bring this up when it comes to need of humanitarian aid is really more about the internally displaced persons. As you can see by the map here early in April, you have a large amount of people, not just engineers, but people, of course, that have been displaced within Ukraine. Now, given the current situation where men cannot leave the country, what you find is that when it comes to, let's say, IT, for example, as many of the engineers are men, they cannot leave and the only way they'd be outside of Ukraine would be if they left previously, right? If they left early. At this point in time, even though there are many who did decide to leave before the invasion, there are just as many that stayed, right? And now what you see is that many engineers, especially those who were in the East and have been able to move, they've shifted, say, toward Kiev, right? And then you also get those who are in Kiev who shifted even further west to Lviv, Ivano-Frankivsk, Zakarpattia, those regions to be a bit closer and further away from where the hottest areas have been during this war. So what happens is there is still a large base of engineers, and some of the issues that have been brought up previously is what's affecting them now, right? When it comes to the situation on the ground and how that affects their ability to work, and how it affects the mentality of those that are willing to hire and work with Ukrainian engineers that are still in Ukraine as we speak. So with the current situation, on the ground, one thing to keep in mind is location, right? Now, as a company, we understand how this works. We talk with a lot of our clients, and we're basically always talking to engineers, seeing, okay, are you at home? Have you found a co-working space? Do you feel better being in our actual offices? Right now, with the infrastructure issues that have taken place, the attacks basically on the infrastructure, it can make things a little bit uneasy, right? Or a lot uneasy, to be honest, with the blackouts, with the working schedules. So when it comes to working with, say, Ukrainian engineers in Ukraine, everything you have to keep in mind is, okay, where is your engineer going to be located? Obviously, it's hard to speak about safety because of the attacks that we've seen. However, there are places that are safer than others. There are buildings that we would look at and say, okay, these would be possibly more secure because of location. Also infrastructure, right? Now we're seeing a bit more in terms of blackouts, but it does vary by region, right? So you do have certain regions that do get hit a lot harder than others, right? So all of these things are very important when it comes to figuring out or piecing together the puzzle, so to speak, of, say, wanting to still work with these really talented Ukrainian engineers, but understanding that they can't leave right now, right? Like many cannot leave, many are still there, but of course willing to work. And that's why we mentioned, say, working schedules, right? That's something else that, if there is flexibility, also helps in terms of figuring out what's the best way to actually work with, to hire engineers that are currently, say, in Ukraine at this moment, whether they're working, say, from home, bunkers, offices, right, co-working spaces, whatever it is, there, of course, are certain things to consider when moving forward there. And this brings me to different models, right? Obviously, I believe that everyone who wants to hire in Ukraine has to find a model that works for them, right? We have plenty of people that want to hire engineers directly. There are great benefits to that, right? You can sometimes, depending on the status of the company, it may even be easier to hire someone directly. It may even be easier to work on ways of getting them out of Ukraine at some point in time. But again, that depends on the employer's philosophy in terms of hiring, and of course, how much they can dedicate, how much time they can give to the actual process. You also have freelancers, right? Very similar to direct hire. Maybe you want to support in some way, but you're not necessarily ready to hire someone directly and go through that process. So many of the engineers, unfortunately, because there were a lot of companies that cut engineers initially, right? They said, you know what, this is too risky. We need to maybe either diversify, back up, or just move completely out of Ukraine, which is very unfortunate. But the reality is that those things did happen. And now you do have a lot of engineers who are freelancing, right? Like they have a setup of their own. They're finding ways to actually work with clients, and therefore connecting, whether it be from someone in the East, the West, just in order to work. Because as mentioned previously, many of the engineers are men there, and many have sent their families abroad. So it is still very important to, of course, give those opportunities, and that they have those opportunities to make a living, right? Many are supporting families abroad, whether it be significant others, extended family, children. And I've seen that with a lot of the engineers that we work with, even though things are very difficult, their resolve is intact. Right? The same as with every Ukrainian. Everyone wants to work and get through this, and I'm looking forward to a day when this is over and Ukraine is victorious. So I've seen a lot of engineers that have always been hardworking, but work even harder now in order to make sure that they can provide, whether that be working with the company directly or even freelance work.
Alfie, maybe you may allow one remark, and this is, I think, really important, let alone or regardless of hiring somebody directly or freelancer or using models like staff augmentation. What we know, our guys and lots of our Ukrainian developers, no matter they are inside Ukraine or outside Ukraine, they use their income massively to support the war, the military, their families, their friends. They buy a lot of stuff. So definitely a form of donation is also to just consider, although the circumstances are not easy, getting engaged with this still great IT development pool that is available. Okay. That's what it is. I just wanted to add that remark, Alfie.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that we've looked at as well, even with our model, when we talk about staff augmentation, making sure that we are basically, yes, we're a business, but we're trying to make sure that we can actually be fair and give as much as possible and support. That's been one of our things, making sure that we don't abandon our Ukrainian engineers, making sure that we still promote Ukrainian engineers. As a company, we have various locations, but Ukraine is important to us. And that's why we say, you know what, we don't want to just jump ship, right? We want to make sure that we're still offering these opportunities, however they come, to our Ukrainian teams and potential Ukrainian engineers.
Yeah, and maybe also how the question may be important before you come to that, how do we handle the electricity power supply situation in our particular case? So what we have done, we have organized a fuel-based generator, an accumulator, and actually right now on this weekend, this is going to be installed in our office. We have ordered 2 Starlink solutions from Mr. Musk, Elon, and also sending constant recommendation to our guys who are not so close to our office. They're spread all over the country. Where is there co-working capabilities that you can rely on? We have good internet, also redundant power supply solution, so on and so forth. So our job is to just inform everybody within our company that they still can have can work 8-9 hours a day to get the job done. Yeah, thanks.
All right. So with that being said, we made a list of things that we see as questions, right? And things that everyone has to kind of ask themselves. And Andreas spoken a little bit, right? So what happens is when a company wants to hire people in Ukraine, often they want to do so just because, well, they're great engineers, out of the goodness of their heart, but they don't necessarily think of everything that's involved in that. Right. So do you need an engineer to be available consistently, right? 8 hours, or can they work in segments? So what we've seen is that many engineers, even with the issues that are there now in terms of infrastructure, they can get in 8 hours of work. It may just not be completely 8 hours, in a row. And if someone is okay with that, the company is okay with that, then there still won't be many issues because of the contingencies that Andreas spoke about when it comes to having generators and being able to moderate things when it comes to blackouts, right? Also location, right? Some people do prefer that their engineers be, say, either in the middle of a city or they think it's safer in the middle of nowhere, right? These are things that we have looked at because we've had engineers spread throughout in various regions of Ukraine. And of course, understand the consistency issues that might come with all of that. Also about engagement, right? I do believe that the best thing is to make sure that, well, you have the time and the energy and you can deal with the fact that, hey, you know what, sometimes your engineer in Ukraine won't be available, right? Like that's part of it. If you have a work culture where someone's available on call all the time, this is one of those rare situations where that might not be the case, right? There's a lot of trust that has to happen, a lot of trust involved when it comes to now working, whether it be directly with engineers through a company in Ukraine that has engineering talent. There's a lot that has to do with trust and the ability to basically give a little bit of leeway, knowing that everything that you need done will actually be done. Okay, so these are things that if we're talking to clients, we mention this, right? We say, hey, look, let's go through this list, let's talk about it, because you know what, things are a little bit complicated now, right? And there will be more consistency soon, but for now, there of course are going to be things that, if this were obviously a normal situation, it wouldn't happen, right? You wouldn't have to worry about someone not being available immediately on a call. But it doesn't change the fact that the engineers there are working diligently and making sure that they earn that trust. Right. And as Andreas had mentioned, right, if you're vetting a company, right, or vetting just working with an engineer, like the situation on the ground, right, backup generators, Starlink. So we've seen a lot of that, right? Whether it's backup generators run by gasoline, whether it's inverters, right? So you're inverting, say, a DC battery to AC. So there are some ingenious ways that engineers have been able to continue working and continue to stay connected, which is very important when it comes to just understanding the mentality, right? No one has quit. No one has said, oh, well, I guess I can't, do my job now because things are unstable. What you'll find is that there are constantly ways, all right, that the Ukrainian engineers there in Ukraine are finding to be consistent, right? So the generators are there, Starlink usage, mobile networks, all of these things are being used in great ways to ensure that there are backups and there are consistencies just in case things, whether it gets better or even worse in some way. There are many ways now that people are adapting, and it's going to continue to adapt, I believe, especially going into the winter months, as we've seen a lot of attack on infrastructure. But I do feel confident in saying that Ukrainian engineers will figure it out, right? They find a way, and that touches on the spirit of those Ukrainians there being able to find a way to make it work and ensure that even though this is a horrible time, that you can still live, right? You can still live and support your family and do things that you actually love to do. Then now everything else here, this is just kind of an example of what it will look like to have sort of a checklist, right? What type of support does, say, a company offer an engineer, right? These are things that we've had to think of this entire time, whether it be relocating engineers early and moving them to other locations, whether it be, as Andreas mentioned, providing, we still have our offices there, providing backup generators, even finding co-working spaces, right? We have these calls basically every day, making sure that everyone is okay, everyone's functioning properly, making sure that everyone is as safe as can be expected. And then when it comes to contingencies in place, should a location be compromised, right? What are the backups, right? What other locations are there? I believe that if you're going to continue to work with Ukrainian engineers in Ukraine, which I hope is the case, of course, I think that's what everyone hopes, is that it's kind of give and take, right? It's a matter of understanding and setting expectations, right? In terms of, say, communication, in terms of availability, but also understanding that you don't need to adjust your expectations in terms of quality, because that is something that we have seen a lot of, is that Ukrainian engineers are very much proud in terms of what they're able to produce. And even now still want to be a part of really good projects and really interesting opportunities, because they see that this won't last forever. You know, like that's something that is very important. This is something that will not last forever. This is something that eventually will end. And as we've been talking about, the rebuild process will be there. And a lot of that rebuilding will take place with the assistance of the engineers that are there now. But the engineers that are there now on the ground, still working, some working and volunteering in the military, some working, supporting their families, as Andrea said, supporting the military when it comes to finances. The engineers there are going to be a critical element of everything moving forward. And I believe it's the responsibility of companies such as ours, the Nearshore Friends, who have for years worked with Ukrainian engineers, to make sure that we are not forgetting them, to make sure that we are looking after them and providing all of the assistance and support that's needed in order to make sure that at the end of the day, everyone is as supported and feels supported, because that's something that we will definitely probably hear a lot of. We spoke about it a bit before. How much support are people getting, right? How much support from the West on other matters? I do believe that really you just want to feel like someone has your back and that you are being supported. So with that being said, I didn't want to take too much of the time, but just thank you for that time. And I would say, continue to support Ukraine, whether that be in hiring, whether that be in hiring direct, working through a company, whether that be in, giving infrastructural support, right? We are constantly looking for new ways to ensure that we are supporting the engineers there, whether they be our engineers or someone else's engineers. This time, a lot of companies are coming together and working together to make sure that no matter what happens, that when this is over, that there is still a vibrant IT community there in Ukraine.